Hello and welcome to this week's Power Channel TV. This week we're going to dive into more fuel injection topics here. And this week we're going to cover the P174 PE system lean code. So much like all the other trouble codes, we're going to talk about what causes it. All right, so sort of the theory behind how this system works. And then we're going to dive into the troubleshooting element of it, talking about ways that we can do the troubleshooting longhand, basically using back probes and a voltmeter. And then we'll also dive into the laptop side of it there and show you how to diagnose with that as well. So discussing how this system works here first. Now, the name of the code is this PE system lean. PE stands for power enrichment. So what happens when the engine is running under light to moderate load? Typically it's going to be using closed loop function if it's a turf engine. So it's going to use the oxygen sensor to kind of keep the mixture pretty lean for fuel economy. However, when you have a sudden change in workload on the engine and you increase it substantially, the engine has to respond to be able to give the power or torque that you're after to get the job done. So the engine has to richen up, and it's very on par with what a carbureted engine richens up to. And it moves into an enrichment mode called power enrichment. So that is essentially a mathematical formula that the engine is running off of at that given time. Okay, so it's something somebody developed on a dynamometer to find a best case scenario for how the engine should run then. So what is taking place behind the scenes is technically the O2 sensor is not in play in terms of closed loop operation anymore. However, when in power enrichment, it will look at O2 sensor millivolts and decide whether it is trailing too far of a low voltage number, which means that it is lean, okay? And it can determine ahead of the fact that before you run into any sort of detrimental engine problems that, hey, power enrichment's leaner than I'm expecting down here. I can't make any changes up high, but we better throw a code here to let the operator know something's not quite right. Okay, so to kind of recap that again here, we are using the narrowband oxygen sensor to tell us, hey, we are seeing a lower than what we would want to see voltage number coming from the O2 sensor, and we need to let the operator know there's a problem here before they cause any damage to the engine potentially from running it too lean. So diving into things that can cause this code now, primarily the fact of fuel pressure is going to be our number one thing we're going to need to check here. It's the one constant the computer counts on to be there and within a pretty tight window of operation. If it exceeds that window of operation, namely lower pressure, you are getting less fuel from the injectors. All the math formula works around of pressure being within a certain range, and if we drop that pressure substantially upwards of 10 psi or more, we will now deliver substantially less fuel from the injectors on each pulse too, which usually ends up resulting in this particular code. Some of the other things mechanically that can cause this problem, if we have a wildly misadjusted valve train, valve lash primarily, we end up with a loss of compression here. We end up moving the charge straight through. Primarily, you're going to see it when you have an exhaust side that is way too tight. The valve is hanging open. Really what happens is the charge moves all the way through the system here and ultimately doesn't get burned completely. So the O2 sensor registers that as more fresh air than unburned fuel at that point, and ultimately will end up with this lean code. Other mechanical faults, typically just like what we talked about in the previous episode concerning the oxygen sensor operation, is leaks in the exhaust system. Anything that can allow fresh air into the exhaust system will cause this system to react and throw this P174 code. So you need to be very cognizant about looking around at exhaust gaskets where it mates from the exhaust flange on the muffler to the cylinder head, as well as looking for the end caps of the muffler, look for any soot tracing coming out of there. Those are all things that could lead to this code. And of course, the fuel pressure being the other number one root cause of this that we've found so far. Other than that, typically there aren't too many mechanical reasons you would set this code. Now, to look at troubleshooting this, really what you end up having to do is monitor your O2 sensor voltage. So you need to basically look at it and make sure that it's within an acceptable range. So we would be looking at the O2 sensor plug down here, and much like the last trouble code, you'd back probe and monitor with your voltmeter as to what's actually going on at the O2. So what I'm doing is I'm back probing the gray wire with a black stripe, and then of course the dark brown wire. And I'm going to hook the gray one up to my red meter lead, and actually the yellow one is my red meter lead. And the dark brown wire, which is my 5-volt return, will get hooked up to the black lead. So right now we get basically a 5-volt reference here, okay? So that's part of the diagnostic element of this. As soon as I turn the board on and it runs, this number will drop away as soon as the heater comes into play. So I am quickly descending into the millivolts here, and it is coming out into the 300s, low 300s or so, okay? That would definitely indicate a lean condition. And typically what you're gonna see there during normal operation under heavy load, and you can plug your laptop in and watch this too. I'll explain how you get there in a moment, but you could just reach your voltmeter up to the seat on the machine here and watch this under heavy work conditions. So you'd really have to get the machine out and work it, watch where this millivolt goes to. And you know, again, we're trying to target somewhere in the high 700s at the absolute lowest. Typically it's going to be hanging out 800, 900 millivolt range, almost 1 volt. When it's under heavy load and power enrichment's working. If it's tapering off, you know, 6, 5, 4, 300 millivolt range, you know you definitely have an issue here. Now you're going to need to start troubleshooting it. Of course, starting with fuel pressure, then looking at the exhaust system, etc. Okay, so let's look at the laptop software here, and I'll show you how we work with this. So much like the last trouble code we worked on, you're going to be focusing on your O2 sensor millivolts here. So you'd have the computer up and working, sitting on your lap while you're out cutting grass at the machine, and we would run the system here, and of course looking at the O2 sensor millivolt. Now remember, it doesn't actually engage till about 10 seconds into this, and then all of a sudden you'll see it start dropping. Now in my scenario here, I'm in open air right now. I don't have the O2 sensor in an actual exhaust system, but it's pretty much fallen right in line with what we were seeing on the voltmeter. So it just shows you can do this one of 2 ways here, or do it both ways for confirmation as sort of a sanity check. But again, you're trying to target anything north of 750 is going to be normal, especially when you're in power enrichment. Okay, this would be a strong indicator to me that we have a severe lack of fuel delivery, or we have a giant leak in the exhaust system somewhere. Okay, so that pretty much sums up our particular code here for P174 if you run into this code in the future here. Okay, again, we're concerning a power enrichment system is lean is what it's indicating. All right, with that being said, we will turn it over to questions.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Mark Nelson. I'm one of the product trainers here at Briggs & Stratton in Customer Education, and I'm going to try to help out with answering some of the questions this afternoon. If you're still typing something in, just wanted to bring this to your attention that there is a service and repair manual on the fuel-injected engines. And I'll tell you what, if you want to write this down, the part number is C as in Charlie, E as in Edward, CE8182. And basically you can download this whole service manual right from the Power Portal. It's in the Briggs & Stratton engine section, and there'll be a tab that says EFI engine support. And you'll see a link for this book, so you can download this and have all of the information. So for example, when Tom was doing this P174, he's got a whole page here, and it walks you right through as far as what to do. So let's try for a couple questions. So Chris from Medford, and it says, how does an O2 sensor work? Does it measure oxygen? And Chris, in a sense, you kind of did answer the question. the O2 sensors, it's similar to in your car. There's a probe that will basically stick into the exhaust stream in the muffler. And it's measuring, like you indicated, it's measuring the amount of oxygen that is in that stream. And based upon how much is there, it's the ECM, or the electronic control module, is adjusting up and down whether to add fuel or take away fuel to more or less get that to stay in that 700 to 800 range, like Tom Billigan was mentioning there. Emerlo from Grand Fork in Canada. Hello, good neighbor to the north. Would a vacuum leak do the same? In Ermelo, yes. I think if you're saying if there's some type of air leakage going into the combustion chamber, yes, that is going to affect the amount of air going in there, which again is going to kind of goof up the mixture reading on that. So yes, I would be looking for any type of air leak excuse me, from the manifold and from the vacuum and from the breather hose and those types of things, along with the exhaust system, to try to isolate it. Chris from Medford, does the brain change to try to compensate for a lean condition? Meaning, I think you're meaning, Chris, does the ECM try to change the amount of fuel going to it? Yeah, because picture it, it's like a window, and the ECM is trying to hold it's trying to compensate so that mixture stays in that range that Tom gave us, like that 700 to 800. But if what happens is, if it says, okay, I'm going to throw a whole bunch more fuel at it because it's running too lean, and it opens up totally all the way, but yet it's still not registering the right mixture rating, there's where it falls out of the window, and that's when the trouble light comes on to that. Okay, what else have we got? Oh, John from Phoenix. Did you see the game last night? And I bet he must be referring to the Packer-Lions game, the Miracle in Motown last night. So yeah, I did see that last night. And boy, for our dealers in Michigan and in Lions fans in Michigan, I'm sorry to say, boy, that's a heartbreaker for you folks, but wow, what an end to a game. You had to really doing everything right to get that many chances to come back from being down 20 points. Okay, enough about football. So I'll tell you what, we're going to throw this back to John Piechowski, and he'll wrap it up for today. Okay, thank you for joining us.